was blinded in my left eye with a piece of human shrapnel.
You stupid, stupid person. Actually, you're not at war with me. You weren't at war with my daughter. You're at war with yourself.
His muscles relaxed and I lowered him to the track and closed his eyes.
And that was the start of part 2 of my life.
The verdict itself is no surprise at all. The 52 people who died at the hands of 4 young men whose bigotry was only matched by their callousness on July the 7th, 6 years ago, were unlawfully killed, a coroner ruled today. Those 4 witnesses you've just heard are here, and for the next half hour we'll discuss the impact of the attacks and today's inquest on these people's lives. Julie Nicholson's daughter Jenny died on the tube at Edgware Road. Philip Duckworth was blinded in one eye by the Aldgate attack. Esther Hyman's sister Miriam was killed on the number 30 bus at Tavistock Square, and Tim Coulson forced his way into a carriage on the Circle Line to help fellow passengers. All 4 gave evidence to the inquest. Let's start off by the inquest itself. What was it like as an experience, Julie?
Well, I dedicated 5-6 months to the inquest, and I determined that I would be there for as much of it as I could. And as it began, I think I thought I was going to be able to be quite objective. And indeed, there were times when I could sit there sort of almost feeling that I was separate from it. But there were times where, you know, what I was listening to was really quite shocking. And I responded with my gut, not my reason. So I think there was a sort of conflict about who I was there, in a way.
Tim, the experience for you, the detail that was gone into was pretty extraordinary.
It was, even though at the time in November when I gave that detail, it was old news to me, but nonetheless as harrowing as if it were the very next day. In preparation for that, took about a month to work out what on earth I was going to make myself do in order to get through that day. One of the best things I did do in the end was to actually make my wife come with me, because I felt I couldn't even make the journey on my own on that day.
How did you find the inquest, Esther?
I underestimated it and found that it was taking up, I'd say, 90% of my headspace. The details were, of course, harrowing, but a worthwhile process.
How did you find it, Philip?
I got quite a lot out of going on the day, and I met some other guys there on the day, and went through quite a lot of details were filled in for me that I wasn't aware of. So
Do you think it was a worthwhile experience?
very much so, yeah. I think it was definitely like a sort of final air of finality for it, for me, really putting it all behind me.
Now, all this week on Newsnight, we've been hearing testimony from people who gave evidence to the inquest, including from my 4 guests here tonight, about the bombs at Edgware Road, Aldgate and Tavistock Square. The deadliest bomb was on a Piccadilly line tube between King's Cross and Russell Square. It killed 26 people. Here's the story of one of the passengers, George Roskilly, and London Underground manager Gary Stevens.
I was supposed to start work at 9 o'clock.
I remember thinking this could well be where it all ends, George.
Some of the people in the lift expressed a concern, saying there'd been a large bang.
I was so lucky.
Where have you been? Why have you been so long?
I've been using that line for 18 years, and it was one of the worst packed trains I'd ever got on. But I thought to myself, well, I'm only going to Holborn, I can live with this. The bomber got on at King's Cross, and he stood to my left, approximately 4, maybe 5 feet away from where I was currently standing then.
Started doing some paperwork in the office, normal day.
Dozens of other people literally forced their way on that carriage.
My office at the time was at Russell Square, above Russell Square station.
There was a bang, and immediately I thought we've hit a train.
And the lights flickered in the office. I just thought it was a normal power surge, which happens a lot on the stations.
Pitch smoking black, and I could see nothing, nobody. Audibly, there was a lot of crying, there was praying, screaming, but that died down again in my mind, maybe a minute and a half, and it went quite quiet.
The driver, he had a torch in his hand, and he had about 12 to 15 some seriously injured customers behind him. I asked him what had happened, and he said he didn't know, and that what he did know was that there was some seriously injured people down there, and they needed assistance. There were some injured customers at the front of the train in a little huddle, all speaking, and they were very traumatised and disorientated. I spoke to them, I explained who I was. I think the words that I used was, "Hello, my name's Gary. I'm a manager from London Underground. I'm here to help, and help is on its way."
And then there were people I saw waving around these mobile phones with a built-in light, but that was useless. You couldn't see nothing. You couldn't even see the hand that held it.
When I got into the first car and I see the devastation that had been caused, that's when it finally struck home that there'd been a bomb and that various people had lost their life. Some were seriously injured. It just caused devastation, and it's something that'll go to the sort of grave with me. I shall never forget it.
There were, in that carriage, 26 people that were killed. A lot of them, I would assume, around me, but there are also people, again, I was told, that were killed behind me, sitting in the seats behind me, and also down by the drivers, which is approximately 10, 15 metres.
Do you have any idea why you lived?
No, I have to be honest.
I stayed with inside the car with all the injured customers until help arrived, which was approximately 40 minutes after I got there.
40 minutes?
40 minutes. And the 40 minutes I spent there seemed like 4 months, to be honest with you. It was so long waiting for help to come.
And I think I left there around about 10:30, 20 to 11. And at that point, as far as I'm aware, there were no paramedics.
We only had one stretcher, and so someone had the bright idea to go next door to the Russell Hotel and get some sheets and blankets, and we was using them as stretchers. 4 of us would take a corner, place the injured person in the middle of the blanket or the sheet, and then we'd walk them up, put them on the platform. Put them in the lifts, then put them in the ticket hall, and they dealt with them in the ticket hall, which had become a battleground operating theatre.
When I left, yes, I would say it was almost like a war zone. And they put this person down in front of me. And I looked down, and it was very surreal. You just would not know what they were. They were just black, covered in black. And at that point, I thought, well, I've had enough. Nothing I can do here. I did put it on the back burner for 6 months, and then I had a breakdown at my daughter's. And my wife said, well, you've got to go to the doctors now. I said, well, yeah, I've got to go to the doctors now, and I did. And I got counselling.
It's something that's never gone away. It's with me every day.
It's gone right the way through. It's broken families up. It's marriages have been broken through it. People have lost jobs. The trauma of that day goes on.
Well, that was George Roskilly and Gary Stevens. Obviously, this isn't something you ever get over. How does it continue to live with you, Julie?
Well, I think for me, I get used to I've got used to it. I've got used to the trauma. I mean, that gentleman's quite right. It doesn't go away. But I think it finds its place. And some days I can live fruitfully and thrive in what I'm doing. And then some days, for no apparent reason, it's like a black cloud comes down and it's all there again. The loss, the trauma, the grief is just as it was 5.5 years ago.
You're nodding there, Tim.
Yes, I think I've yet to meet the person who said they're over it and they can't remember it and they don't feel it anymore. It affects your daily life, whether you want it to or not. One of the earlier broadcasts this week, Lisa French spoke of something that I was glad to hear, and that is you don't sleep. I haven't had a sound, solid night's sleep for the last 5.5 years. That doesn't mean I haven't slept, but it's certainly an interrupted one, and I know what it's interrupted by.
Do you all have that experience? You just don't sleep?
I have a very different experience, but I'm not the parent of a lost loved one, and I wasn't there to
You lost a sister.
experience it. The way that we've come to terms with it as a family is to channel our energies into the work of the Miriam Hyman Memorial Trust, and it's been a sanity saver.
And what about you?
As people who know me well, and thought I get quite a good night's sleep. I think I got over a lot of my sort of physical, mental problems when I was still in hospital, but it did go on for a long time. And
Julie, you were a vicar, weren't you?
I was.
Did it cause you to lose your faith?
Well, I wouldn't say lose my faith. That's a whole other subject. But I think when this thing happened, it was, I would describe it as, not that I've experienced one, but a sort of tsunami that just comes crashing in. And so every fibre of being, every aspect of life is just shaken and distorted by it. And of course, when one has a vocation, as I did, then that's going to be affected as well. And the years since have just been a rebuilding, a reforming. And what was of prime importance to me in all of that was the rebuilding of relationships with my immediate family, my other children,
Could
who
you continue
for a
to
while
preach forgiveness?
Preach forgiveness. Well, I think forgiveness is very important. I don't think we can function really as human beings and societies without it. But I think this term forgiveness is a model that's made to fit so many things, and I don't think you can talk about forgiveness when there might be a fracas in the playground to something like this or mass genocide in the same breath. So I didn't continue to preach it, really.
You didn't?
No.
One of the really striking things is how narrow is the circumstance that saves you or kills you. The chap in that film there, the people were killed all around him, but he wasn't. I mean, what does one conclude after an experience like this about fate or chance, Esther?
I have a very personal point of view, and I know that it may be my truth and a subjective one and not an absolute one, but I have come to believe that Mim's higher self chose that path that day in order to widen her arm's reach, in order to be able to do more good than she was able to do in life, and that she left to us the job of nurturing the seeds that she'd sown in her lifetime. It's my truth.
You, Philip, came very, very close to death. You're blinded in one eye as a consequence, but I mean, I saw you the other night talking about how you were lying there and were taken for dead, in fact.
That's right, yeah.
What do you conclude about fate and chance?
I mean, I just can't believe how lucky I've been. I think I didn't realise that I'd been quite so close to the bomber as I was, and there's almost a sort of element of denial that I can't have been that near. But it was only really at the inquest when we went through it all again, and they said to me, we all of us here can't believe quite how lucky you've been. I think it really sunk in at that point.
What does any of you feel about the young men who did this? I mean, the striking thing about all that testimony is the dignity of it. I mean, you described the leader of the bombers as a stupid. a stupid man
Well,
who was at a war
yes.
with himself. Have any of you come to any closer understanding of why they did it?
Not a closer understanding, just more satisfied with my belief that it's a disbelief that anyone that day could choose to do what they did with such hatred for mankind, to practice it only a couple of weeks beforehand, and then to actually carry it out. Total disbelief that another human being could be so evil.
I feel compassion towards them, actually, to the individuals, to those individuals who I feel were manipulated and in the course of their radicalisation. And I don't say this in a condescending way, but as I said in the film, I feel pity for them, that they were driven to such desperate acts against fellow UK citizens.
But they had a choice, didn't they? I mean, I take the influences and the warped ideology, if you like, that led them to it. But I think ultimately they chose to do what they did on that day.
I do take
And
your
you've got a
point.
piece of one of these people blinded you in your eye.
That's correct, yeah. It's just very misguided. It's been very difficult for me to be very angry about it. We've been dealing with sort of physical issues, things like that. But I just can't understand the mentality. It's just so out there, and so I can't really weigh it up at all.
So you just kind of don't comprehend it, really.
No, I've not really got an angle on it.
Do you still get on buses and tubes and things?
Yeah, it's on the tube today, Circle Line.
I say that if they succeed in changing our behaviour patterns, then to an extent that they've won. But what I have realised recently is that they have changed my behaviour, but for the better.
That's a good point.
How has it changed it for the better?
Well, I've found a very different direction in my life, part of this World Health Organization initiative to eliminate avoidable blindness globally by the year 2020, and that's given me a sense of satisfaction.
I suppose there's something else. The tube carriages and buses and so on are full of strangers, aren't they? And you were all strangers before this happened. And you're not anymore.
I think somebody said at a very early stage at one of the meetings of bereaved families that we've all been forced into membership of a club that nobody wanted to join. And there was an irony in that at the time, but I think actually as the years have gone on, I mean, even this week today I've met people that I hadn't met before in the community of July the 7th.
7-7 community, as
Yes.
we're sadly called.
I would certainly echo the dynamism of meeting. Totally unexpected. After my journey to the court early morning, I was introduced to someone that I've never met, someone who was immensely important to me. And that was the wife of Stanley Brewster. So nearly 6 years later, I got to meet the person who had loved and had children with that man that spent his last few moments in my hands.
He was the man who literally died in your arms.
Yes. And it was a hugely emotionally charged meeting, as you can imagine, especially as we were on our way into the courtroom. But what was also lovely about it, and Sandra is very happy for me to talk about that, was that she wanted to touch the person who last touched her husband.
I can very much relate to that, because we also got to meet the two gentlemen. We already knew one of them, but the two gentlemen who held my sister's hands in her last moments and who took the place of her loved ones.
And that meant a lot to you?
A tremendous amount. We're very grateful to Clive and Richard.
Well, the 52 simultaneous inquests into what happened that summer's day took 5 months. The over 300 witnesses gave accounts of horror, of compassion, of courage, of strangers who comforted each other and willed each other to live. The judge did not conclude that any lives could have been saved had the emergency services worked better, but the inquiry did provide embarrassment for the people who are supposed to keep us safe. Richard Watson reports on the coroner Lady Justice Hallett's findings.
The inquest represents the most thorough investigation by far into the events surrounding the London bombings. The coroner, Lady Justice Hallett, praised the emergency response, but said there were serious shortcomings, substantial confusion and lack of communication at some of the bomb sites, she said. But overall, she concluded the evidence does not justify the conclusion that any failings of any organisation or individual caused or contributed to the deaths. The coroner also focused on the question of preventability. Could the London bombings have been stopped by better or more timely work by the police or by MI5, the security service? She warned against the use of hindsight, but even so, there are some strong criticisms in her report. She says the story starts with this man, Martin McDade. As Newsnight revealed last night, he was a suspected extremist from Leeds who claimed to have been in the Special Forces. He was being watched by MI5 from 1998. Sadiq Khan was on one camp he attended in the Lake District in 2001. MI5's witness said it was unfortunate that police surveillance of him in Sadiq Khan's car 2 years later was not passed on to them. Sadiq Khan was also associated with this man who was being investigated by MI5, suspected of supplying Al-Qaeda with money and equipment. We tracked him down in 2007, but he didn't want to speak. It was Newsnight which first revealed that Sadiq Khan had been covertly photographed and trailed by MI5 in 2004 as part of their investigation into another terror cell. The coroner had concerns about the fact he came onto their radar. First, that MI5 told the Intelligence and Security Committee that there was nothing to suggest before 7/7 that Sadiq Khan was more than a small-time fraudster. The coroner noted that he had highly suspicious meetings with the leader of another active bomb plot. Second, that MI5 told the ISC that Sadiq Khan had been classified as a desirable target, when in fact this categorisation was never used in this way.
The ISC and the reports and the role that they played has been highlighted, that it is a very inadequate system of control. You will see that this is a paper tiger with no authority. They have no investigative powers. They have no authority to compel a witness to come before them and give evidence. So one can only wonder what the purpose of the ISC is actually about.
MI5 was also criticised for poor record keeping, which meant there was very little recording of the decisions made. The coroner noted, "I heard very little, if anything, from witness G on how the system has improved." One of the most dramatic moments at the inquest came when MI5's witness G was confronted with some rather uncomfortable facts about a surveillance photograph of suspects D and E, which later were identified to be Shahzad Tanweer and Sadiq Khan. They had the chance to send this picture to the FBI in New York, who were holding a jihadi supergrass who'd met these men. This was the high-quality colour photo released to the inquest. Inexplicably, MI5 sent this cropped picture to the supergrass. The coroner said that the image was dreadful and virtually unidentifiable, noting that MI5 had been unable to explain why the picture of Sadiq Khan had not been shown at all. But ultimately, she said the failure had little or no practical effect because good quality images were later sent to the supergrass. Nevertheless, she made a formal recommendation about the handling of this kind of material. MI5 expressed deep regret at the inquest for failing to stop the bombings, but it's always argued that even if it had more information about Sadiq Khan before the attack, it wouldn't have placed him under intensive surveillance because there was no intelligence at the time suggesting he was going to target the UK. Broadly speaking, the coroner supports MI5's position, and the security service itself points to a number of improvements, including more resources, a centralised triage system where new terror leads are assessed, and a new prioritisation system which concentrates on cells of people rather than individuals. The coroner concluded that it would not be right or fair to criticise the security service for the fact they did not pay greater attention to Sadiq Khan, because the material confronting the security service at the time would have comprised literally thousands of strands of intelligence of varying degrees of quality in relation to thousands of possible contacts and hundreds of possible targets. Hindsight should be ruled out, she said.
We've got to bear in mind here that it wasn't the emergency services and it wasn't the intelligence or security services that planted these bombs. But what do you make of this conclusion that any changes in the way the security service behaved could not have prevented the bombings?
I don't accept that. the evidence that I've seen in the last 5 years, those particular photographs and a video clip of Sadiq Khan actually in Pakistan using an AK-47 and so on, is compelling evidence that that's not normal behaviour for a citizen residing in Britain. Therefore, if he'd been picked up earlier, even for ordinary questioning, which can happen in this country if you cycle on a pavement, then there would have been an element of preventability, even if that had been July the 6th.
Is that a widely shared view?
Well, I don't share that view, I must say. I think, you know, I do have what I like to think is a healthy cynicism about MI5 and the security services, that possibly all that is known has not been revealed. But I don't think that that is... I think it's a fantasy to expect more. And I really think that MI5 and the security services need to be able to do their job, and I don't think it could have been prevented.
But did they do themselves any favours by being so reluctant to testify?
No, but they did testify in the end.
Yeah. Now, what about the emergency services? It takes an hour, apparently, to get ambulances to the scene of the explosion in Tavistock Square, and yet apparently she says that no lives could have been saved had they behaved more efficiently. How does that sound to you?
I think for me the issue wasn't about the time that it took, because as I said in my testimony, I was already underground. Stan had died in my arms. I was bringing solace to Alison at that time, the next passenger, badly injured. So for me, the measurement of time didn't matter. I think she was certainly right to point out that, in fact, on medical evidence, no one else could have died. They were already dead. What was going on above ground was totally irrelevant in many respects, from my particular understanding.
What did you think about that finding, Philip?
I formed the view from the people that helped me directly that if they could have been effectively the front line and communicated better with the people on the ground, that may have helped coordinate efforts a bit better.
Do you think that this is an end now? I mean, of course it's not an end, but you know what I mean? In terms of inquiries into this, there are still people saying there should be some sort of further inquiry, a public inquiry or whatever. Is the inquest enough?
On a personal basis, it is.
What Esther?
We learnt many details of Miriam's individual circumstances, and I think many lessons are being taken away. Whether those issues are actually addressed and changes implemented is yet to be seen, and that's what we need to push for.
You both agree with that?
I agree with that. I think the inquest has done its job, and I think the judge, or Dame Heather, did a superb job with her team, and I think, for me, personally, the inquest has given me all I could have hoped for and more.
Well, thanks to all of you. That's all from this programme. I'll be back at the usual time at 10:30 to talk about the fallout from yesterday's elections and referendum. 52 people were killed in the bombings on July the 7th. Good night.